Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to support Bill C-643, an act respecting a National Spinal Cord Injury Awareness Day. I would like to congratulate my colleague, the member for Montcalm, in bringing this bill forward and for being an advocate for those living with disabilities. Establishing a day to recognize the impact spinal cord injuries have on Canadians, the healthcare system, and the economy will bring awareness to this debilitating and serious condition. Mr. Speaker, up until 2010, health officials shockingly had no idea how many Canadians were living with spinal cord injury or the economic cost of the condition. But a report commissioned by the Rick Hansen Institute, I know this House will all want to, and we've heard it already tonight, recognize Rick Hansen, who became a world-class wheelchair athlete before undertaking the Man in Motion World Tour in 1985, during which he rolled more than 40,000 kilometers in 34 countries in 2 years, raising $26 million for spinal cord research. The Institute's commissioned report revealed some startling data. There were over 86,000 people living with spinal cord injury in Canada, or about the same number as the population of Red Deer, Alberta. And there are over 4,300 new cases identified in our country each year. After speaking with Spinal Cord Injury Canada yesterday, I'm informed the number is now 96,000 Canadians. Approximately 51% of spinal cord injury cases are the result of traumatic injury, and 49% are the result of non-traumatic injury, or rather diseases such as ALS and cancer. The report laid out for the first time the scale, magnitude, and cost of spinal cord injury in human and economic terms. This was an important milestone because measuring the extent of the problem is the first step in developing strategies for preventing, mitigating, treating, and hopefully one day curing spinal cord injuries. Mr. Speaker, spinal cord injuries require substantial medical care. Canadians with a spinal cord injury who are admitted to intensive care units have reduced mortality and morbidity, as well as improved neurologic recovery. The average length of hospital stay after the initial injury is 140 days, or almost 5 months, including critical care, acute care, and inpatient rehabilitation. New methods for treating spinal cord injury are being studied, including surgical decompression, therapeutic hypothermia, and neuroprotective agents. Mr. Speaker, the economic cost of traumatic spinal cord injury is $3.6 billion a year, including $1.8 billion in direct medical costs. The lifetime medical costs, in the words of a recent study, for a quadriplegic exceed $3 million, and for a paraplegic, $1.6 million. For Canadian families, the average cost of a manual wheelchair is $4,000 to $5,000, and the average cost of a power wheelchair is $10,000 to $15,000. The long-term health care costs are not due to paralysis, but rather to medical complications. Severe depression is also common among people with spinal cord injury. Treatment for depression accounts for almost half of physician visits. Mr. Speaker, these are just numbers and do not speak to the impacts on the person affected and on families. I cannot begin to imagine how frightening and overwhelming the days, weeks, and months following a spinal cord injury are. Everything changes in an instant, and people will have many questions. Canadians with spinal cord injury need to know that they are not alone, and that there are people and organizations that will help through acute care, rehabilitation, and return to the community. Canadians with spinal cord injury need to know there are resources available to help them find the latest information on research, clinical trials, and rehabilitation techniques that may have an impact on improved function and recovery. They need to know that there are financial resources, peer support, and organizations that can help renovate the home to make it accessible, get assistive devices to help with everyday tasks, and return to the community. But Mr. Speaker, as a country, we can and must do more to support Canadians living with spinal cord injury and their families. Mr. Speaker, all levels of government must work together to put in place essential measures to secure the right to education and economic participation. We need policies and programs that promote physically accessible homes, hospitals, schools, transportation, and workplaces, inclusive education, elimination of discrimination in educational and employment settings, vocational rehabilitation to optimize the chance of employment, microfinance and other forms of self-employment, benefits to support alternative forms of economic self-sufficiency, access to social support payments that do not act as a disincentive to return to work, and correct understanding of spinal cord injury and positive attitudes towards people living with it. The member from Montcalm's bill will help to raise awareness, and this is positive. Mr. Speaker, the Urban Futures Institute predicts that the number of people living with spinal cord injury will increase sharply in the coming years, reaching 121,000 in 2030. The expected increase is largely due to the aging population. Older people have more falls and suffer disproportionately from illnesses such as cancer. Mr. Speaker, I've had the honor and privilege of working with Canadians with physical and mental health challenges my whole life, and every day I learn from them and am inspired by them. I also want to recognize the work of all health practitioners and organizations which work hard to improve the quality of life of Canadians living with a spinal cord injury and their families. I know many of us have taken part in Spinal Cord Injury Canada's Cheerleader event, during which we spend the day in a wheelchair and live firsthand what accessibility really means. We learned very quickly the obstacles Canadians in chairs face. Everything is harder. It is hard to manage the chair. It doesn't always turn well. Getting into an elevator is hard. Managing in the washroom is hard. Reaching counters is hard. Getting up and down Parliament Hill is really hard. And cars do not always see the chair. Mr. Speaker, the Cheerleaders event is extremely important to get exposure for people in chairs, to raise awareness, to see the obstacles people face, and to understand that there are financial hurdles and that we as a society must do more to help. The member from Montcalm's bill will ensure that annually there is a day devoted to raising awareness about spinal cord injury. Mr. Speaker, in closing, spinal cord injuries have severe long-term impacts. They affect almost 100,000 Canadians and their families, have far-reaching consequences, including financial hardship and caregiving needs. And the number of Canadians suffering is increasing as the population ages. The costs for people suffering from spinal cord injuries number in the billions. Mr. Speaker, spinal cord awareness will foster an environment for greater research into new treatment options. Awareness will help provide doctors with improved options for treatments. Mr. Speaker, let me once again congratulate the member on her bill, and let us all remember there is life after injury. Canadians with spinal cord injuries are active, they are social, and they are vibrant members of our communities. Let us all celebrate ability and fight for more help for Canadians with spinal cord injury and their families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the Honourable